in the 21st century cloud. Con ustedes, Thomas Koulopoulos.
Kenji, thank you, thank you. Wait, before you go, though, I have an observation here.
Please.
And I look out at the group, and I'm amazed because I see no one with a tie, including you. So, can I take my tie off? Can I take my tie off? Is that okay? Thank you very much. So 1 second while I rearrange myself. Thank you so much for being here for this afternoon session. I know I am standing between you and the reception, so my apologies for that, but we'll try to keep this short, perhaps 3 or 4 hours, and then we'll be done. I have a lot that I'd like to speak with you about. So we'll take the tie off, we'll get rid of that, and we'll also get rid of the jacket too. Why don't we just get comfortable, huh? All right. The shirt stays on, though. The shirt stays on. So how are you doing? Are you doing well? Have you had a long day? Yeah, a lot of information? You know everything now, right? You are leaders. That's what I heard. Kenji, you said these folks are leaders, right? So as leaders, I have a very simple question for you that I want to ask you. I want you to tell me, please, as leaders, what is your vision of the future? What is your vision of the future? Do you have it in your mind's eye? Are you crystal clear on what that vision looks like? Does anyone have that vision in their mind right now? They're absolutely certain what the future will look like. Raise your hand if you know. Because if I saw a hand go up, I would swap places with you right now. You could come up here and present, right? None of us know with certainty what the future looks like. But here's my premise today. As I look out at this group, my belief is that the 1,000 or so people that we have in this room right now are the leaders and the visionaries of Mexico. Do you agree? Because you have to look at yourselves that way. You see, you have the ability to change the world in ways that are unimaginable to us today as I stand here. So I'm not going to be arrogant. I'm not going to predict the future to you. None of us can do that. What I will help you do is disrupt your vision of the future enough so that you can build a new vision of the future, because the future is constantly evolving. But we get arrogant. You know, we build these lenses, and these lenses become very important to us. These lenses define how we look at the world, and we take pride in these lenses because we've built them ourselves. Our career, our profession, our discipline, our education, these are all a lens by which we look at the world. But these lenses, they get cloudy. Does anyone believe this quote? Does anyone? Raise your hand if you believe that everything that can be invented has been invented. Does anyone believe it? Thank God. Thank God. But what if I told you that this is the way that you and I behave? We behave as though everything great has already been invented. You would say, of course not. Tom, please, I'm not that. I'm a visionary. I don't behave that way. Don't be so arrogant. I behave this way. We all do. And the reason we do is because of this lens that we take such pride in. How many people in this room, when they were young, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, said to themselves, when I grow up, I'm going to be a technology leader? Anybody? One person did. What a visionary. One person said, I'm going to be a technology leader. Congratulations. The rest of you probably said, I'm going to be perhaps, I don't know, a business person or a writer or a poet. Did anyone say they wanted to be an engineer? Any engineers in the room? Did any of you want to be civil engineers? Do I see a few hands, yes. Did you become a civil engineer? You did. I wanted so badly to become a civil engineer. My father was an engineer. And I grew up in a household surrounded by the early computers of the digital age. And I was so amazed by watching my father as an engineer that I too wanted to become an engineer. But I didn't want to build small things. I wanted to build big things. Bridges and roadways and infrastructure. So I applied to my father's alma mater. And I was accepted. Now, I have to say to you, I was not the brightest student. I'm probably one of the few people you will ever meet who has written more books than he read through his entire academic career. But I got accepted. I got accepted. And I said to my father with the acceptance letter in my hand, I'll never forget this moment, I said, Dad, I got accepted to the same school you went to. Aren't you proud? And he said, that's fantastic, Tom. What are you going to do? I said, Dad, I'm going to be a civil engineer. And he said, civil? He said, Tom, the future is not about civil. The future is about computers. This is the information age that we're entering. I said, no, 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 no. I want to build a bridge, a big, beautiful bridge. And he looked at me and he said with great compassion, he said, Tom, if you built a bridge, it would be a beautiful bridge. I just wouldn't want to cross it. So I thought, okay, I'll show my father. I'll go off to engineering school. And I did. I went to engineering school. And I will never forget the first day, one of the greatest lessons of my life. The dean of the school got up to give us a lecture, all the new engineers. It was a large auditorium like this. And he said, you are now engineers, and you will never look at the world in the same way again. Engineers have a certain way of looking at the world. And with that, he walked over and he grabbed a chair. And he said to us, when you see this chair, what do you see? And I thought, it's a chair. What else could it be? And he went on to say, when you see this chair, you don't see 4 legs. What you see are 4 vectors of force. And I thought, shit. My father was right. I don't want to see vectors of force when I see chairs. I want to see the design and the beauty. But it dawned on me, 20 years later, it finally dawned on me what he was trying to say. What he was saying was, every single one of us, all of us, have this lens. And it's the lens through which we see life. And we build that lens. We grind it year after year, decade after decade. And we become so arrogantly proud of the lens that nothing will disrupt our view through it. And that is the greatest danger to innovation. It is the greatest danger to surviving the future as an individual and absolutely as an organization. So what I want to help you do is disrupt the view through that lens. Those lenses get cloudy, and as we get older, we take greater pride in them, when what we should do is trade them in. Trade them in for a new lens, a lens of a child, a lens of someone who sees the world differently than we do, a lens of someone who can add value through innovation. So how do we do that? What does that mean? Well, let's first dispel the myth that everything great has been invented. Let me ask you to think of one word that defines how we've gotten to where we are today over the past 200 years. Think of it, what might that one word be? Some of you are probably thinking, well, innovation, information, computers, oil. What else might you be thinking of? What other words come to mind when I say one word that defines how we've gotten here to where we are today? Imagination, what a wonderful word. Creativity, perhaps. Let me ask you to think of it in another way. That same word defines how we will traverse the next 200 years, how we will survive the future to come. But it's the same word. Do other words come to mind? Evolution, collaboration, passion. All good words. Vision, all good words. But you know what? The word I'm thinking of is a very mundane word. And it is what you do. It is what CISCO does. It is what we've done better than any other era of mankind has done. Connections. The sheer power and the magnitude of the connections that we are creating will alter forever, not just technology, but the fundamental behavior of human beings. And it is the volume of connections that most fascinates me when I think about what's happening today and what will change the future. And I know you heard a lot, Carlos talk this morning about the number of connections that are coming. I want to give you a different way to look at this. If you think about the growth in human population over the last few hundred years, from 1800 onwards, and you think of the number of connections that we have as human beings to each other, and then you add to that the number of connections that machines have to machines, the Internet of Things that we've been talking about. The most conservative number you find, and there are larger numbers, CISCO says it'll be 1 trillion connections by 2020. My number is 70 billion, but that's an interesting number. You know why? Why do you think 70 billion connections is an interesting number? Because the human mind has 100 billion neurons. So when I talk about the cloud, this is what I want you to think of. Because we can't predict how the cloud is going to change behavior. The world will change in ways that we can't even begin to assume. But here's a way to think about how much it will change behavior. The internet is to the cloud what the primordial soup of life was to intelligence. The primordial soup was the single-cell organisms, the amoebas, right? This is the broth from which life finally formed and took shape. The cloud is intelligent life. Today, we are living in the primordial soup. Today, we are living in single-cell amoebas that don't communicate well together. They don't connect well together. That's the degree of change that I see happening over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. But you know what's amazing? Is that if I were to ask you to think of what the world looks like today, this very connected planet, how many of you would think of a map? Probably not many, right? This is not the image we have of the world. So I want you to picture in your mind's eye, an image of the world, this connected globe. What does it look like to you? How many of you, when I asked that question, had this image in mind? Raise your hand. Most of us think of the blue marble. Some of us think of weather maps or satellite images. You know what's amazing? Ask this same question of children. Their view of the world is Google Earth. Constantly in motion, constantly changing. Now, how many of you had in your view of the world a router? How many? A satellite, a telephone, a smartphone, an iPad, an iPod. Anyone? Do you see how the same person who wanted to be a lead technologist when he was 3 years old? Amazing. Why is our view of the world so outdated? Why do we get stuck in time like this? Well, my point is, we get stuck in time because we become conditioned. We become conditioned to think a certain way. Does anyone collect typewriters? Anyone? Has anyone used a typewriter recently? What magnificent devices these things were. They were mechanical marvels. I collect old typewriters and I love the way they feel. It's such a satisfying, gratifying experience. How many of you have written more than one page on a typewriter? More than one page. So when my kids, my nephews, my nieces, they see these in my study at home, they ask two questions. The first question is, how did you cut and paste? The second question, and this is the more telling one, is how did you think using this device? Do you get that? How did you think using this device? Well, you don't think in a typewriter. A typewriter has no capacity to think. But if you look at the way these kids play, and if you want to understand the future of work, look at the current state of play. The way they play, they think in the machine. The machine is an extension of themselves. So however strange the future will look, it'll be much stranger than anything you and I can today consider. Why? Not because of the technology. Technology we can all predict. What we can't predict is behavior. And that is what most needs to be disrupted, and that is what most needs to be understood with the advent of any new technology, including the cloud. So what might that future look like? Well, it's funny. I don't know how many of you have seen this viral video on YouTube. I have a young niece who's about 13, 14 months old right now. And a few days ago, she was playing with a magazine, just like this little girl is here. And she was trying to move things on the page. And I said to my brother-in-law, I said, what is she doing? And he said, she thinks it's an iPad. To a 1-year-old, a magazine is a defective iPad. Right? And if you notice what this little girl is doing is she's pushing her finger against her leg saying, my finger works, the magazine is broken. You see, what you grow up with is never technology. Technology is not what you grow up with. To you and me, this is technology. To a 1-year-old, this is just life. It's not technology. Watch the way they play, and you will understand the way that we work. And I'll repeat this theme over and over again, because so much of what's to come
Have you ever borrowed a book
is going to take us by surprise.
from thousands of miles away?
These ads ran a number of years ago. They were ads from AT&T that promised you will read books on devices smaller than a laptop. You will send a fax from the beach. You will teleconference in your pajamas or your bathing suit. What year were these ads aired? What year was it? It wasn't that long ago. 1993. 1993. And you know what's amazing? All this technology today looks so mundane. A GPS, a Kindle, an iPad, we have all of this.
Have you ever watched the movie?
And AT&T didn't bring any of it to market,
You will.
right?
And the company that'll bring it
In
to
fact, CISCO did more to bring this to market than AT&T did. 1993. It was not that long ago. Do you see how quickly the future changes? And yet we keep getting it wrong. I mean, we're smart people. Why can't we get the future right? If we can predict technology, why is it so difficult to get the future right? Because we don't understand the behaviors that accompany disruption. What we understand is the technology, and technology alone does not define behavior. Behavior defines technology. So what will this future look like? One hypothetical example, we're all today tagged like wildlife, right? Our cell phones allow us to be identified, our behaviors to be captured, our experiences, our shopping. So I can walk into a mall. You can tell me what clothes I should be wearing, what colors match my wardrobe. You can tell me what eyeglasses I should buy because of my condition that's degenerated over the past 10 years. If I go to the food court, you can even tell me what I should be eating. But is this really the future? Or is this just the technology applied to the present? Because we can do this today. There's nothing futuristic about this. What I want to help you understand is how difficult it is to truly innovate around behavior, not around technology. When you innovate around technology, all you're doing is inventing. And creating more stuff, you know what? We have enough stuff. We don't need more stuff. We have enough landfills filled with stuff. What we need is value. And the difference between innovation and invention is that invention does not necessarily create value. Innovation always does. Do you know this show? Have you ever watched this show? In the States, we call it Real or Not Real. I want to play a little game with you. It's my version of the game. Rather than call it Deal or No Deal, I'm going to call it Real or Not Real. I'm going to ask you to tell me if these devices are real devices. They are devices that I've actually acquired over the years. I love gadgets, all kinds of gadgets. Some of them are real, some of them are not. You tell me which ones exist and which ones don't. This first device attaches your laptop to your steering wheel. What a great heads-up display, fantastic feat of engineering. How many of you think this is real? $40 US. Absolutely real. Yes, of course. And this was a long time ago. You can tell from the laptop. This is not a new invention. A USB cup warmer. So if you want coffee on the go, you can plug your USB cup warmer into your laptop on your steering wheel. Yes. Do you have one? You have one. Do you use it while you're driving? Just so I know to stay away from you on the road. Okay. It gets better. It gets better. Where do I get all these, by the way? There is a Bible of invention, and it is called the Sky Mall Catalog, right? It is the Bible of invention. You know, there's not many things that I truly want, but I can't make it through a Sky Mall catalog without feeling completely deficient, as though I'm missing something in my life. It gets better. A USB toaster that you can plug into your USB cup warmer. All right, this one is a spoof. I'll grant you that. It gets even worse. The e-holster. This is not for guns and what have you. This is for your smartphones and your portable keyboards and your iPad and your iPod. Ballistic nylon, fashionable leather, eholster.com. Real or not real? Yes, and I can't wait to wear one of these through the airport security one day just to see what they think. The MSN iLoo, an internet-enabled porta potty. Wait, before you answer, it is internet-enabled on the inside and also on the outside. Is everything okay in there? Everything's fine. Real or not real? What do you think? Real? But it's a great idea, isn't it? It's a great idea. It should be real. This is one of my favorites. This is the Ninja phone. You know, if you're like me, you don't keep your phone on your belt loop anymore. You keep it in your pocket, so you're always fumbling to try to find it. Well, now you'll never miss that important phone call. When your phone rings, bam, it's right there. Real or not real? Yes, it is the latest edition of the SkyMall catalog, in fact. I can't wait to get mine. I already ordered it. Look, you know, we're getting ridiculous, all right? The level of absurdity is increasing because we can invent anything. Nothing is stopping us. And when we have 3D printers, you know, Carlos talked about these. These are not future devices. You'll have a 3D printer. You can order on the internet and print your product at home. You know, what will that do to manufacturing? We can invent anything. Because you can invent does not mean you're innovating. It does not mean you are creating value. And value is what we sorely need and what we most have to, as leaders, cause our organizations to look for. So what are the game changers that are most going to define this future? Number one, and just a few of them that I'll go over with you. Number one, uncertainty. We are surrounded by levels of complexity and uncertainty that are without any precedent whatsoever, certainly in our lifetimes. And I think for our children this will be much, much worse. Do you remember this fellow, Maxwell Smart? So I love this magazine, Invention and Technology magazine. I've subscribed to it for years now. I got this particular issue a few years ago, and I left it on the kitchen table. And my daughter, Mia, who at the time was 14, she saw it. And she said, "Dad, I don't get it. Should this be funny?" And I explained to her, I said, "Yes, of course, he's talking into his shoe. Of course it's funny. He's a secret agent." She said, no, I get that, Dad, but why didn't he just use his cell phone? I said, "Mia, he didn't have a cell phone. This is what we thought cell phones would look like. And by the way, it's a rotary dial shoe. It's not even a push-button shoe." When the first Motorola brick was it, how many own a Motorola brick? Remember these? $3,000 to $4,000 these things cost. What was the, did you have one, Carlos? How much did you pay for it? About $3,000 or $4,000. But you were so proud to have it, right? What were the most outrageous projections for cell phone usage, total global cell phone usage, by the year 2000, when the Motorola brick was first introduced? What do you think the most outrageous number was? Anyone? The consensus was around 10 million. The high end was about 100 million. How many cell phones are enabled globally today? 5 billion. 100 million versus 5 billion. This is not what's called a rounding error. We are miserable at truly predicting the effect of technology on behavior. And what you see when you see how we use cell phones, when you see how we use iPads, when you see how we're addicted to technology, is a fundamental change in behavior, not just a change in technology. And the level of uncertainty that we're inhabiting today is going to cause us to rely on these technologies and to change behaviors constantly in a very uncomfortable way. But frankly, what's happening has to happen, because as uncertainty increases, opportunity also increases. You see, we leave that out of the equation. When uncertainty increases, opportunity also increases. So there's no less opportunity in the world today. There's greater opportunity. What we see in emerging markets is nothing but opportunity. But the time to react to each opportunity is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And without technology, you cannot cope with that level of uncertainty. But when I say uncertainty, do you really understand what that means? Think about it. Do we really understand uncertainty? And let me prove to you what I mean by this. I want you to think of a game. It could be a board game, a sports game, some game that you think epitomizes, defines uncertainty. What games come to mind? What games do you think are games of uncertainty? What do you think of? Maybe roulette, chess, poker. Someone once said to me, marriage. I thought, closer. But you know what? None of those games are games of uncertainty. Why? They're games of probability because they have rules. Uncertainty is the absence of rules. Uncertainty is the absence of rules. There are no rules in an uncertain game. So you want to play a game of uncertainty? Play chess with a 3-year-old, where the king can leave the board, go to the other room, and not come back until you say, I give up. That's a game of uncertainty. Why? Because the rules have been taken away. And isn't that what we're struggling with? I mean, isn't that fundamentally the problem? Is that the rules are changing on us. Yet here's what's happening while the rules are changing. We're succeeding. And you heard this earlier today, and I want to emphasize this point because it's a very, very important point. Success is your greatest nemesis when it comes to sustaining innovation. Which doesn't make sense, does it? Why would success be a problem? Why would success be a challenge? Because it establishes a pattern that you cannot break free of. And I'll prove it to you in less than 15 seconds. Don't take your eyes off the screen. I want you to tell me which direction the girl is spinning. If the girl is spinning clockwise, raise your hand. If she's spinning clockwise. If she's spinning counterclockwise, raise your hand. Is she spinning both ways for some of you? Yes? Okay, if you feel very proud because you can make her spin one way or the other, do the following for me. Make the girl on the left spin clockwise, the girl on the right spin counterclockwise. Can anyone do it? So let you in on a secret. The girl is not spinning. There is no clockwise or counterclockwise spin. What you see here is a silhouette that looks the same from the front and also from the back. So now that your rational mind knows she's not spinning, how many of you can at will change the direction of spin? How many? Look around. How few hands are going up? Isn't that incredible? Why can't the rest of us change the direction of spin? What's going on here? There is no spin. Because you've established a pattern. You've successfully established a pattern, and your mind will not break free of it. It's a survival mechanism. I mean, it's what we do as human beings. We've got incredible pattern matching capacity. We're machines built to identify patterns. But here's where it gets intriguing. As an individual, yes, I can get stuck in a pattern. But I can disrupt that pattern. If you blink, close your eyes, think about the girl spinning in another direction, and look at her, she might actually change for you. After a while, you'll figure it out. But what if today was your first day in a new job, and this was the room with all the new employees? So here you are. You want this job. You've wanted it for years. You finally got it. And the CEO of the company is standing up on the stage, and the CEO is saying, see that girl? She spins clockwise for us, and that's why we succeed. And you think to yourself, uh-oh, she's not spinning clockwise for me. Do you raise your hand and say, excuse me, Mr. CEO, she's not spinning clockwise? No. You keep your mouth shut. You'll wait and see what happens. Next day you come to the job, and your coworker says, as he pats you on the back, what about that clockwise spinning girl? That's why we succeed. How long will it take until you see her spinning clockwise? A week, a month? And then what will you do to the next coworker? You'll pat them on the back, and you'll say, isn't it amazing how she's still spinning clockwise after all these years? That corporate pattern matching that results from success, and the greater the success, the greater the inability to break free of the pattern, is one of the most significant impediments to innovation. And brilliant companies with brilliant people get stuck in this modality every single time. It is a dilemma that few of us can break free of individually, and far fewer collectively. When we talk about social networking and the power of the crowd, we have to acknowledge that these patterns are very dangerous things. When we think about the Occupy movement, it's teetering on a very, very narrow razor's edge right now. Social networking can be a great positive, it can be a great negative. Patterns in and of themselves are neutral. It is how easily we can break free of the pattern that defines how well we can innovate over and over again, as individuals and as organizations. You know what's amazing? I'm looking at the crowd. Many of you are still trying to change the way she's spinning right now. Aren't you? Let me describe it to you in a scientific manner. When you begin with every new idea, every great idea begins with infinite flexibility. And over time, you lose that flexibility because you scale, you increase the complexity, the scope of the network. And as all of that increases, flexibility decreases until you get to a point where you can no longer unlearn the pattern. And at that point, the value begins to diminish as well of whatever product or service you're delivering. So the question is, how do I disrupt? How do I disrupt? The good news is that we're surrounded with opportunities to disrupt today. That all you need to do to open your mind to disruption is to plug into the cloud. The cloud is fundamentally a disruptor. It is a mechanism by which we will question and re-question, reevaluate and re-engineer these patterns. And I see the cloud as a powerful behavioral shift, not just the technology. Did anyone ever own one of these? It's one of the first transistor radios built by Sony. One of the most popular devices ever created in the electronics industry. You know, Akio Morita, the founder of Sony, when he first introduced this and brought it to the marketplace, he called it a pocketable transistor radio. Not pocket, pocketable. The reason was that the radio did not fit in a standard shirt pocket. So he actually had tailor-made shirts for his salespeople that had double-width pockets so they could put the radio in there and call it a pocketable transistor radio. Everyone thought this was the craziest idea. Why would anyone want personalized music? And yet it sold over 6 billion transistor radios, portable transistor radios, over the course of half a century. And then Sony came back to market again decades later with the iconic innovation of my generation and many of yours, the Walkman. Remember these? You know, when I first bought small headphones, I didn't believe you could get good music quality out of a small headphone because I grew up with large headphones that had big magnets, and they came with a neck brace because the magnets were so heavy that your head would tilt. And they only had a 6-foot cord because no one would go in public with headphones on. It was absurd. That kind of behavior would never be tolerated. Sony owned the studios, it owned the music, it owned the artists, and of course it began introducing MP3 players. But it didn't end up owning the MP3 market, did it? And as we all know, Apple did. Why? Because the innovation was not around the device. In fact, Apple did not invent a single thing. Much of the technology they licensed or purchased from other sources. This was not an invention. This was an innovation, not of technology, but fundamentally an innovation of behavior. And isn't that true also for the iPad? How many of you today have an iPad? So please tell me, what is the killer app for the iPad? What's the killer app for the iPad? And if anyone says Angry Birds. I've been asking this question for 2 years now, and that's the only consistent response I've gotten. What is this? It's a platform for changing behavior. It is a platform for innovation, a simple blank sheet of paper on which we innovate. I have my own killer application for this, by the way. I'll share this with you. Don't let this leave the room, please. I have a business plan in place to bring this to market. Most of you now bring your MP3 players to your gym or to work out or what have you, or when you run. Here's my killer app for the iPad. Please don't leak this. But yet we can't live without it. Yet we can't live without it. So how does all this play into the cloud? I've been referring to over and over again as the cloud being the great disruptor. Look, there are 3 levels of economics we can achieve when we move to the cloud. Today, most of us talk about Cloud Economics 101, which is the preschool of cloud. It's cutting costs. And look, it makes a lot of sense to use the cloud to cut costs. It works well. But my father, the engineer, used to say something to me when I was young. He used to ask me that question about, is the glass half full or half empty? And his answer always to me was, it's not half full, it's not half empty, Tom. The glass is the wrong size. That's cloud computing 101. We've been using the wrong size glass. So we'll use computing as a utility. We'll buy it when and how we need it. And that's fine. That makes great sense. But that is barely the beginning of the value proposition for the cloud. When you talk about the cloud, I want you to think beyond cloud computing and think to how it changes the business. Think about how it changes the business. Cloud Economics 201, the MBA. The cloud accelerates the creation of value. And this, to me, is one of the most powerful aspects of the cloud in business, allowing us to create value at a pace that is phenomenal compared to what we were doing just a few years ago. You know, to be blunt, I despise the way that we have become accustomed to building business systems and information technology solutions. It's kind of like buying something at IKEA. I had a friend of mine who bought a whole household of furniture at IKEA and spent months assembling it, right? So I don't know what his time is worth, but it couldn't have in any way have justified having bought the furniture unassembled. But that's the way we buy our information technology solutions, unassembled. It's as though you bought your car in pieces, and then you had to put it together when you got home. It's like Christmas morning, putting together all the toys for your kids, right? And you're cursing yourself. You know, why didn't I have someone else assemble it? But that's what we do in our businesses. The cloud provides assembled solutions, so we can focus on the core competency of the organization, which is not building the back end, it's running the business. But even that is not the ultimate value proposition of the cloud. The ultimate value proposition is real-time innovation, collaborative real-time innovation. And this can only be achieved in the cloud. So let's go back to the iPod example. There are 5 derivatives of innovation. First derivative innovation focuses on the device. So the MP3 player, as it was first invented and brought to market, that is first derivative innovation. Very few companies make money off of first derivative innovation. They are the pioneers. The folks who make money are the second derivative innovators, who start to move from the device to the data. How can we use what we understand of the market's behavior to change the device in a way that makes it more appropriate for not just the technology, but for the behavior of the market? The market is now shaping the innovation. Third derivative innovation is then moving entirely to the data, away from the device, and saying, how do we use what we know about the behavior to create new products, new services? But fourth and fifth derivative are purely experience-based innovations. In the case of iTunes, it is the genius mix. In the case of Amazon, it's recommending what others are reading. You heard earlier today that the network will know you better than you know yourself. All of your behaviors, your experiences, your habits, all of these will pass through the network. And ultimately, the network will innovate for you. It will create personalized innovations that conform to who you are. And that personalized view of the world is absolutely central to survival in the cloud, because we're surrounded with options, with apps, and with data that we can never make sense of on our own. So the real key to unlocking the power of innovation is getting to fourth and fifth derivative innovation, where the system innovates itself based on the behaviors of the user. And that we're becoming treacherously close to right now. And it fascinates me because I think that really is the ultimate innovation, is innovating based purely on experience and on behavior. If you think about it, we're not too far from that today. The second big game changer, and these are the only two that I want to talk about, but they are the monsters. They are the gorillas in the room. They are the ones that occupy my thinking most of the time, is the tremendous clash of generations. If you think about it, in any company today, there are 3, 4, 5 generations working side by side. And this is only going to get worse. If you plot, think about this for just 1 minute. If you plot lifespan and the increasing lifespan of individuals, which is increasing across the globe today in developing and developed countries, and you plot against that the increase in work life expectancy, how much longer we'll be working, what you find is that the two lines intersect and eventually they predict that we'll be working after we're dead. We're working longer and longer, and we're living longer and longer. But are we really working as 5 generations? Is that possible? And you ask yourself, what generation do I fall into? Am I certainly not a Gen Y or a Gen Xer? Am I a mature? Am I a 50 plus? Am I a baby boomer? Here's the best way to answer that question, not based on age. Answer the question the way you answer every other question about innovation. What is your behavior? So here are some questions that I want to ask you so you can tell me what demographic you fall into. Have you ever done this? When my daughter read this question, it was a survey that Delphi Group did a few years back. She looked at it and she said, "Dad, that is so old school. I would never call you. I would text you, of course." And that's the only way to get the kids down to dinner, is to text them, "Dinner's ready, come on down." How quickly things change. For how many of you, first thing you do in the day, before anything else, is check email? Let me see the hands. First thing. How many of you do it as the first or second thing? How many do the first and second together? The translator's having fun with that one, I can tell. My daughter sleeps with her laptop on the pillow next to her. Is that good behavior? I don't know. I didn't grow up with a laptop on my pillow. But how many of you leave home and have a panic attack if your phone isn't with you? Same thing, right? I mean, I desperately want to implant this thing because I can't bear to be without it. Have any of you experienced, by the way, phantom phone syndrome? PPS? Phantom phone syndrome is if you set your phone to vibrate all the time, suddenly you'll feel your phone vibrate, you'll go to get it, and you realize there's nothing there. It's like having a limb that's been removed. This has become so essential to who we are that we can't imagine our lives without it. It's a strange set of behaviors, and it's difficult. Carlos and I were talking about this. It's difficult to counsel your children on this because we didn't go through it. My kids have more friends on Facebook than I do. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Do you argue with your spouse? Has anyone had a spouse unfriend them on Facebook? It's a very unpleasant experience. Not from personal experience. I'm just telling you, it probably is. We use the term dial as though kids know what it means to dial. My son Adam is 12. At 11, for the first time in his life, he used the dial phone. He had never done this before. So this is my original AT&T phone that I had growing up. I still have it, and I refurbished it. It's a beautiful phone. And I put it up in the attic, and Adam said, "Can I use it?" And I said, "Yes." He said, I want to call Mom." I said, "Go ahead, call your mother. All you have to do is stick your finger inside the number and turn it." So he stuck his finger in the number 1, and he turned it. And he said, "Dad, it's not working." I said, "Adam, you have to pull your finger out." He had no idea what it meant to dial. This generation is marvelous to watch. I mean, I love just observing the way that they play, because the way they play is the way they will work. They have complete disregard for intellectual property. Right? Intellectual property means nothing to them. They want to share, they want to collaborate, but with an intensity that frightens us. They don't want to own it. They want to share it. They want to give it away. And I'll tell you, some of the numbers here are really startling. If you think about the Nobel Prize, is that a drum beat? Is that like background music for me? I like that. It's very good. If you think about the Nobel Prize over the last century, in the first half of the last century, it was primarily awarded to individuals. In the second half, equally to individuals and to teams. There's a trend here. Collaboration is not just a technology issue. It is a fundamental change in behavior. And you see that in the way these kids operate, in the way that they work. This is the way I played with Legos when I was young. Did many of you play with Legos? I didn't buy a kit, right? I bought a box of Legos. I mean, that was my Lego kit. My son Adam, this is the way he plays with Legos. He socializes with Legos. He doesn't care about the physical Legos. What he wants to do is get online and play with his friends. He wants to have the ability to share what he builds instantaneously. So, you know, for Adam, this to me is a CAD system. For Adam, this is not technology. For Adam, this is just a way to socialize. And once he builds his creation, he can build his own packaging for it. But what he loves is being able to share what he's created with others online. And he'll spend, you know, 8, 10, 12 hours a day doing this stuff. And I wonder about it. I hope the translation is roughly equivalent to what it is in English. You know what? 2 things I will never do. I'll give you advice on technology, on business. I will never give you marital advice or parental advice. But I'm going to share with you one piece of poor parenting, so you never do it, okay? My son Adam one day spent about 23 hours online, and I had gotten sick of it. I was just sick of it. And I finally said, Adam, get off the computer and go watch some TV. I don't know. Thank you for applauding my lack of ability to parent. I don't know what the right answer is. I didn't grow up with this. I thought I would grow up yelling at my kids to turn down the stereo. I don't hear the stereo because it's in their ears, their earbuds all the time. I'm yelling at them to take their earbuds out so they can hear me, right? We never could have predicted these behaviors. What I'm trying to get across is how difficult it is to understand the way the future really is going to change. But look at how they play, and you'll understand how they're going to work. A great success story that has, as part of its basis, Mexico, which I wanted to bring up with you. One of the companies in the U.S. that is very popular is Land's End. Land's End, for some time now, for almost 10 years actually, has had the ability to allow you to create avatars. An avatar of yourself. And you can then clothe the avatar, and they have factories in Mexico where they will custom fit chinos or jeans for your avatar. And you get this marvelous fitting pair of pants. I mean, it's a fantastic pair of pants. You pay a few extra dollars for it, but not that much more. 10 years ago, Land's End gave me some passwords to be able to access their site to build these avatars. So I gave them out to a number of friends. I must share with you, I noticed, because you have to get very detailed. You have to tell all your measurements, your hair color, your eye color, your shoe size, your inseam, your waist, everything. Things you wouldn't tell your closest friend, but you know, you'll tell the internet. Go figure. But I noticed when I gave out the access that men and women do not, with equal honesty, describe themselves. Okay? So leave that as it may. I'm going to show you my avatar so you can see what I mean. So once you build this thing, you can share it with friends. You can go into a shared dressing room and dress each other. And they have over 2 million body types in the cloud that they will match to your body type so that your clothing fits you perfectly. Personalization. Do you want to guess, of the people that get this far and build an avatar, how many do you think actually end up purchasing the clothing? 70%. 70%. Personalization is one of the most powerful effects in the cloud. The ability to create that level of intimacy, that camaraderie, beyond collaboration here, right? To create communities instantly is going to change the way that we socialize, the way that politics and economics play themselves out. I'll leave you with one last thing. All of what I said is interesting, but at the end of the day, we cannot predict uncertainty. That is why it is uncertain. Never be so sure in your ability to predict the future that you ignore the reality of the present. You probably will remember this video clip. It's the moment that they saw the iceberg on the Titanic. Remember this? They're in the crow's nest and they see it and they immediately call it right in and they call it down to the engine room. They sprung into action. You know what's amazing about the story? Is they actually did everything right in the moment. Now, the ship was built with flaws and there were all kinds of things that could have been done differently in the construction of the vessel, but they did everything right. So here you see them calling the orders down to the engine room and the lead engineer there saying, put the screws into full astern, meaning that they wanted to put the vessel into reverse. So they turned it hard over, and then they put the screws into full astern. Here's the problem. Look carefully. There was not just one propeller on the Titanic. There were three. If you put all three into full astern, you lost all maneuverability. It was the absolute worst way to manage the situation. But you know what? It would have been right for any other vessel prior to the Titanic. This technology required a different set of behaviors. But that's not the lesson. That's not the takeaway. You are leaders, right? That's who you are. You're leaders. I want you to look very carefully at the first officer. You see that look of fear, uncertainty, doubt, terror? If you ever see this look in the eyes of a leader, get the hell out of there. This is not a person whose behavior has changed. This is a person who's stuck in the past. It's easy to get stuck in the past. Do we behave this way as though everything that can be invented has been invented? Who do you think said this? It's an actual quote. Charles Dewey, Commissioner of the Patent and Trademark Office, 1899. You're leaders. You're visionaries. Your job is not to just understand technology. Your job is to understand and to shape behavior. And that, I think, is the most powerful position to be in if you're defining the future. Thank you.